is going on? Thoughts from the video. I'm coming back to reaction videos. I'm gonna try to switch it up. You know, reacting to some manga videos. Well, manga recaps. They just recapping mangas for each chapters. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do a long time ago. You guys react to because we need a group. We can react to this shit. Can't do this all alone. This is not fun. We do voices. So the first one we're gonna react to is because Todd, he caught his girlfriend cheating and he wants revenge. I don't know the manga specifically. Now, I'll drop the manga in the description below in case you want to read it yourself. I think I read yourself. But anyway, let's just jump into this. Shall we?
Looking dead in each other's eyes, Aiji witnessed his girlfriend wrapped around another man's arms. To her, she was once her childhood friend, clingy and annoying. But now she lies, claiming that he's nothing more than just an abusive boyfriend.
Oh, man.
A message pings on his phone from Miyuki. She apologizes since something came up with her club activities.
I will believe. That's the thing about when a girl gets caught cheating, it's just butterflies. Either they're gonna pretend to be the victim, or they're gonna get in control to try to ruin you. Or they get ruined. This is one thing. This is a straight fight with them the moment they get caught doing shit.
Not wanting to make a fuss, or MC replies kindly, assuring her that it's fine and wishes her good luck. Introducing Aono Aiji. Feeling a bit down since it was supposed to be their special birthday date, Miyuki Amada, his childhood friend, now girlfriend, had said yes when he confessed to her last Christmas. To Aiji, she's like someone from a dream, graceful and admired by everyone. If they hadn't grown up together, he doubts he'd ever have the courage to speak to her, let alone be dating her. It's been about 6 months since they became a couple. Still, they haven't kissed. Not because Miyuki isn't interested, but because Aiji is simply too shy to take that step. Still, Aiji never imagined she would actually blow off their very first date. But rather than let the disappointment ruin his day, he decided to take a walk to clear his mind. Eventually, his feet led him to the street where the movie theater stood, the one they were supposed to visit together. As he passed it, he imagined being inside with Miyuki, sitting close, with their hands gently intertwined. The daydream almost made him smile, but he quickly shook it off and continued walking through the crowd. His steps eventually brought him to the district he hadn't meant to visit, the Love Hotel area. Realizing where he was, Aiji froze, face flushed red with embarrassment. His imagination betrayed him again. Just
Love
him and
Hotel
Miyuki
District? Yeah, you're
alone in
just
a
cheap,
love
bro.
hotel. He could almost feel her fingers tugging on the back of his shirt, pulling him closer. But snapping back to reality, he cursed himself for being such an idiot and turned to head back. That's when he heard them. The voices of a couple behind him, but one of them stopped him in his tracks. His eyes widened. That voice, it was Miyuki. There she was, arms wrapped around another guy. His heart sank. Stunned, Aiji called out to her, uncertain and shaken. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw him, and she stuttered his name. Both of them spoke at once, confused and demanding to know why the other was there. But things escalated too fast. Aiji grabbed onto her wrist in frustration, making her flinch, and her sideman wasn't about to let that slide. Swinging without hesitation, sucker punching him straight in the jaw, sending Aiji flying into a wall. Walking over, her new man snarled, asking what the hell he thought he was doing with his girl. But Aiji managed to mutter that she's the one who's cheating. Mocking him, her new man asked if he was serious, if he was some kind of stalker or something. Then he turned to Miyuki, urging her to say something as well. After all, she was just telling him how she dated Aiji out of pity, since he's her childhood friend. Or how about because he's boring? Even mentioning how gross
F the chat, bro. F the chat.
his sweaty
F
hands
the
are
chat.
when
I
he
don't know
touched her
about
would
F
be
the chat.
fine too.
F in the
Aishi's
chat.
voice trembled, calling out to her with a weak smile, desperately wanting her to deny it. But her new man wanted to watch him fall even further into despair, mentioning that that's what she tells him in bed anyway. Aishi's stomach turned. Horrified, he asked him to say it again. Miyuki's new man asked her to make a choice, either break up with him or Aiji. And in a moment of desperation, she calls out to him, begging him not to throw her away. So
Oh
he
my
leaves,
god.
she wouldn't be able to go on living.
Girls like that. It's not because
Bit across his face,
you
unable
love
to
that
say
guy.
a
It's
word.
because
But that silence was
some
all
people like
the
that. They
other
got some
guy
kind of
needed.
emotional
With a
attachment.
devilish smile,
You see,
he placed his hands
guy,
on her head.
superior guy just like him.
Or so you'd think.
You know,
But
some
it
kind of fucking
wasn't
emotional attachment.
enough
You don't
for
love
him.
him.
He
Just
needed to
you
hear her
just
say it,
infatuated.
clearly and directly,
Upset.
to tell
The
Aiji
unhealthy,
exactly what he means to her.
Catch your forehead.
Miyuki hesitated.
That's
But
right,
to
right.
her, he's just a childhood friend, an abusive ex. Her words hit him like a sledgehammer. But this guy wasn't finished. He wanted to utterly crush him, demanding that she says it again, looking him in the eyes this time. Miyuki turned to Aiji, whispering that she was sorry. She doesn't even want him to talk to her at school either. And with that, Aishi's world cracked. And from that day on, his once happy everyday life began to slowly fall apart. When Aishi finally made it back to his family restaurant, he opened the door and was greeted with warmth. To them, it just seemed like he'd come home a bit early. His mother cheerfully offered to make him lunch, but he wasn't in the mood. Without saying a word, he declined and walked straight to his room. Since then, he'd barely moved from bed. He spent his days staring at nothing, just waiting for time to pass. No matter how many times his mother came by with food, he just didn't eat. But it got even worse. He kept seeing it over and over. The same nightmare haunted him night after night. Miyuki lying in bed with another man, pouring her heart out to him. Her words echoed clearly in his head. How clingy,
The more you think about it, the worse.
and pathetic
The worse
Aiji
you
had
just feel
become.
dead inside.
All he could do
All you
was
gotta
stand
do
there,
is forget.
a prisoner in his own
All you gotta
dreams,
do is forget.
helplessly
Move on.
watching, begging them to stop. Each time he jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. It had gotten so bad, he became afraid to fall asleep. Still, he forced himself to get up. As he washed his face and got ready, he knew he couldn't hide forever. He had to go to school. His friend jumped up from behind, slinging his arms around his shoulder and asking casually if anything new had happened with Miyuki. Aishi laughed awkwardly, but then he saw her right in front of him, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. His mind flashed back to a memory. Miyuki had once asked if there was anyone he liked. Embarrassed, Aishi dodged the question, wondering why she would even ask. She said he never talked about that kind of stuff,
That hits hard.
asking if she should just
He's
become his
chopper.
bride, but laughed it off quickly, saying she
It's
was
harder,
only
but you know,
joking,
bruh,
while Aishi
gotta move
blushed
on.
and told her to cut it out.
That's
Back
it.
in the present, Aishi reached out towards her, desperate to touch something real, something familiar. Miyuki turned, noticing him right behind her. But before she could even say anything, someone stepped in front of her, demanding that he doesn't come near her again, calling him an abusive creep.
Oh,
Aishi
no.
froze, confused. He still didn't understand what was happening. Miyuki's friend grabbed Miyuki's arm and pulled her away from him, mentioning that if he kept on stalking her, she wouldn't allow him to get away with it. Shortly turning to Miyuki, gently consoling her while they walked away, leaving Aishi shattered, making it home in silence. Back in his room, he collapsed into bed, sinking deeper into despair. But then his phone buzzed, again and again, flooded with notifications. He checked the screen and noticed that the message was from an unknown account, reading, "Die, you're disgusting." And more kept coming, one after another. The voices in his head began to echo. Confused and panicked, he wondered what was happening.
I'll tell you what happened.
Do anything. Then, overwhelmed, he hurled his
Oh, damn,
across the
control.
room, all while more notifications came in. The next
Oh,
day,
damn,
he
control,
didn't
no.
want to go to school,
Accusing
but
me of
he
using
went
jerk
anyway.
so
As
that
he
they
reached
can-
for the
so that he
classroom
can
door,
tell
his
them to
hands
cheat.
trembled. He whispered to himself that it's just another normal
One
day,
tactic,
and slid
the old
the door
tactical
open.
ladies
The
like
room was full of chatter, but everything
But
felt
the
muted.
problem is that,
He
you know,
sat down
they're
quietly,
like
but
so
soon
quick
enough,
to believe
the
the
whispers
girl
started again.
with
The
lack of evidence.
soft but unmistakable murmurs from
With
yesterday.
a lack of
now
evidence, it's quick to
surrounded
believe
him.
her because they
He
believe that's
whispers
like
under
God
his
is you.
breath that he didn't do anything, but then a sharp voice cut through all the noise, telling him to shut the hell up. Since Miyuki's friend thinks there's no way she'd lie. Apparently, even Kondo, her new man from the soccer club, saw it himself. So it's two school celebrities against one freak. Anyone would know who to believe. Aiki sat there, sick to his stomach. He didn't even want to hear it anymore. Why, he thought, why did it all have to turn out like this? The world kept moving. Everyone else went on with their lives. Yet Aiji sat alone, eating lunch in silence. Just then, another message buzzed on his phone. This time, it was from his club. Practice was cancelled for the day, so there was no need for him to stop by. It had only been a few days, yet it felt like something had crumbled. There was no one left in his class he could rely on. Still, even though the club president had already mentioned the cancellation, Aiji decided to go anyway. Maybe someone would be there. Maybe he could talk to them, ask for help. But as he approached the clubroom door, he heard voices inside. They had lied. They'd cancelled it just to keep him away. His heart sank. He had worked so hard on a manuscript for them, pouring hours of effort into something he thought would bring them together, and they just threw it away. To them, he was nothing. Desperate, he thought of going to his homeroom teacher. Maybe she'd still be in the classroom. Maybe she'd listen. But as he neared the door, he heard yet another conversation. They had beaten him there, again, getting ahead of him. Since now, even his teacher was on board, having Miyuki's side. And just when he thought the day couldn't get any worse, he opened his locker and found a note inside, threatening him that if he went and snitched, they were going to the shop. Later that evening, he arrived home,
Damage control.
His mom glanced up from the kitchen, asking if there was no club today. But Aiji forced a smile and lied, saying they were cancelled last minute. She encouraged him to go lie down since he hadn't been feeling well lately. Aiji hated burdening them. Ever since his father passed, his mother never cried, not even once. She always smiled, always held things together. And his older brother, he stepped up, doing everything he could to protect the family and the restaurant in their father's place. Aiji smiled
who I am
faintly.
and know
He couldn't fall
I'm into
apart.
this shit.
He had to
I
endure
take
this
that
pain,
more than
even
such a
if it
random.
meant keeping the people he loved from being
I just
unhappy,
want to give you
even if it
satisfaction.
broke him. Then so be it. Elsewhere, Miyuki hadn't been sleeping well either. She tossed and turned, unable to stop thinking how everything spiraled out of control. Why did things have to turn out like this, she wondered. Why couldn't it all just be a dream? If Kondo hadn't been there that day, she might have run to Aiji. She might have told him she didn't want to break up. Because the way he was being treated now, it almost brought her to tears. But she didn't get to cry. After all, she was the one who broke it. It all started as a harmless girl talk, silly conversations about love and relationships. She had been happy with Aiji, but things weren't progressing as she had wanted. Her friends misunderstood her doubts and assumed she wanted something more, something better.
Oh,
So they
there's a
introduced her
dumbass
to
trying to get
Kondo.
this part of
He
this
was
shit.
popular, charming, and experienced. Everything Aiji wasn't. She tried to decline at first, but Kondo was relentless and undeniably attractive to her. He carried himself with a sense of
Yeah, we know he
confidence
did.
Aiji didn't have. His
He
confidence,
didn't
his
saw a girl he
attention,
could fuck,
it
so
all
that's
slowly
why he
broke
kept
down her
pressing.
resistance. And then one day, they kissed. Everything she'd once wanted to give to Aiji, Kondo took. And then they went too far. Lying in bed together, guilt crept into her chest. Taking the opportunity, Kondo consoled her, since this was all Aiji's fault. If he had made a move, she wouldn't have been there with him. To Kondo, she didn't do anything wrong. In his eyes, Aiji had failed as a man, and she wasn't to blame. But Kondo simply wrapped his arms around her and whispered that they should do it again. And while she might have felt guilty at first, there was also something else. A part of her that didn't want to stop. A part of her that liked it. And once she became dependent on Kondo emotionally, there was no going back. Not long after, Kondo casually mentioned to Miyuki that they could hang out since his club had a day off. She then stuttered, mentioning that the 30th was actually Aiji's birthday. But Kondo didn't care. He could always ask another girl instead.
There you go.
She's tightly, desperate for him to change his mind. But to him, it was always the same. She was still putting her man above him. It made him feel like an afterthought, and he was tired of chasing her. So he told her to end things with Aiji, so that they could both finally be happy. In her heart, she hoped Aiji would one day forgive her. At least, that's what she was banking on. She had spent over 10 years by his side, convinced he'd eventually marry him. But somewhere
look how it turned out.
the woman inside her whispered otherwise. She wanted to confess, to tell everyone she was the one who lied, the one who cheated, but she was too afraid. Afraid of losing everything she now had.
Yeah.
The next day, Aiji
That's how
opened
it
his
is.
wallet
They realize
only to have
that
more
recommend
death notes
image
fill
to do
out.
the right
The
thing.
rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they had gotten worse. As he walked the halls, sleep-deprived and hollow, he opened his classroom door with heavy eyes, and then he saw it. Pasted on the wall, a photo of him and where he lived. They had taken it too far. Now even his family was in danger. Breaking the door wide open, he rushes out the classroom, but standing before him was the last person he wanted to see. No other than Kondo stood before him, asking him how it felt to be a criminal. Aiji had only one question for him. Why would he tell such a lie? His answer? Because it's fun, since losing his girl and everything else makes for a great show. He continues that it's
These guys like him walk
thinking
around like
someone like him could get Miyuki.
Probably some of the backstory. His dad, he's so powerful. He does what he does.
He absolutely loves wrecking people's lives.
The thing about the story of this guys like him, as long as you bring concrete evidence, there's nothing he can hide. He can't do
nothing left. As he closed his eyes, the world around him went dark. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying in the school's infirmary. The nurse looked over and gently said she'll inform his homeroom teacher. But Aiji didn't say much. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. No one was coming to help him. They'd all take Miyuki's side anyway. He couldn't even tell his mom or brother. Not after everything they had already gone through. Just one more year until graduation. But at the same time, how was he supposed to survive for that long? He decided to check his phone once more and froze. It was a message from the president of his club. Since after what he did to Miyuki, they've decided to kick him out of the club. It wasn't true. He hadn't done anything, but it was too late. One by one, he realized all his friends had blocked him. Tears welled in his eyes and began to fall until he had nothing left to cry out. Eventually, he stepped out of the infirmary, telling the nurse he was fine. He wandered the halls numb, making his way up a flight of stairs before stopping to sit alone. He thought to himself that he'd only need to get used to it. Eventually, his heart would go numb, so if he could just endure it, maybe he'd be okay. But the whispers returned, leaving him with no other choice but to think that maybe if he were to just jump, then maybe it would all go away. He found himself walking. The rooftop door creaked open, and there, standing in the breeze, was a girl, someone he'd never seen before. She turned towards him, softly, calmly, and just like that, in the moment when he thought there was no escape, everything began to change. The sunlight struck his eyes, and before him stood a breathtaking girl, demanding to know who exactly he was. And though he might have stuttered at first, Eiji explains that he's a second year who just so happened to be skipping class at the time. Because of course he couldn't just traumatize the poor girl by telling her he was about to jump off the roof. But she stares at him with patient eyes as she tries to remember if she's heard of him before. Standing before us is Ichijo Ai. She's a brilliant girl who placed first in last year's entrance exam. Known for her kindness and beauty, she instantly became popular just shortly after enrolling. She's so popular, in fact, that she already had a bunch of guys confessing to her. Recognizing his name from before, she asked him why he decided to show up all of a sudden. Being confident that she's heard about his rumors, he kindly asked if he could have the roof all to himself, as he's just trying to hide out until their lunch break was over. But she's not budging. She had been there first and refused to give it up, requesting that he find someplace else. Eiji tries to convince her otherwise, since if someone were to see them together, it could be bad news for her as well. But she still doesn't care, and she's still not moving. Sure, she's heard about all the rumors, but to her, it's just a rumor after all. It's not like she saw it herself. Besides, romance is kind of like an illness to her. She has the common sense to know not to just believe in such a one-sided and vague story. But everyone else, on the other hand,
believe a one-sided story, you gotta get both sides.
And execute someone without giving them a fair try. That's when
There's the fact that when it's a woman, they just quick to jump out here and
him
try
this
it.
whole time. But to her, it's not about believing or not, but simply that it's not right to go around hurting other people without hearing their side of the story first, as it's just too big of a risk. And I'm sure she never could have imagined just how much that single statement meant to him. As Eiji whispers a quiet but heartfelt thank you. But suddenly, without warning, the rain started to downpour. Left with no other choice, Eiji suggests they go inside. But to his shock, Ichijo refused. She wanted him to leave her alone, because after all this time, he still hadn't realized why she'd even come up there in the first place. She didn't care about catching a cold, as there was no tomorrow for her. And that's when it finally hit him that they'd both come here to jump. Reaching out his hand, Eiji broke the unspoken rule of never telling a girl to calm down. And what do you know, she crashes out even more. But Eiji couldn't just stand by and watch her hurt herself. Desperate, he grabbed her hand and pleaded with her to stop. It was in their struggle that he lost his footing, and they both slammed back into the fence. As they sat there soaked to the bone, Ichijo demanded to know why. Why was he trying so desperately to protect her? If that fence had been old or rusted, they would have fallen to their deaths. But Eiji didn't want to hear it. He didn't need a reason to save someone. And to be honest, you gotta give it to bro. Because even while they're soaked from all this rain, he had to seal the deal. Because if she had plans to die, then at least she could go out with him. Hell, they could skip school altogether. And that's how you know it was effective. Look at all that blush on her face. Skipping school seemed unthinkable to her, but Eiji couldn't help it. They'd both come to the rooftop for the same reason, but he never imagined he'd be the one pulling someone away from the edge he'd meant to step over himself. And in that moment, Ichijo finally broke. She fell to her knees, tears mixing in with the rain, admitting through a sob that he was right. They laughed together then as the sun finally began to break through the clouds. When they stood, Eiji offered her his handkerchief so she could dry herself off. She hesitated at first but decided to accept it, asking shyly that he not stare. But bro's just like me for real. He couldn't help himself. And while she took a moment to dry off, she did one last glance up towards him and scolded him. With the rain finally over, she asked what they should do next. After all, he had just invited her to ditch school. Surely he had a plan, right? He confessed that he actually had no idea. He had just blurted it out in desperation. And for the first time that day, he realized she was smiling. He thought back to what people always said about Ichijo. The boys who confessed to her never stood a chance. Her friends.
That's always been like, you know, you always be the ones that because of her, just fails bad group. When the MC does it, he just takes W. That was me. I'll be pressed about that.
And humiliated. But somehow she hadn't torn him apart for his reckless
That's just got 20 times. MC just do man, just
Ichijo pulled out her own handkerchief and shyly gave it to him. Eiji, flustered, accepted it, but couldn't resist trying to top her gesture. He rummaged through his bag and had found a rice ball he brought from home. Splitting it in two, he offered her half. And all it took was one bite. Man, you would have thought Noodle Ramsay himself made it. She tasted the tuna and mayonnaise, surprised by how good it was. As she explained, it was just a filling from any convenience. But she looked at him as if he had revealed some kind of secret treasure. Proof that there was still so many good things left to taste, to try, and to live for. Fired up by that thought, Ichijo's curiosity sparked again, and in that case, he figured why not invite her over to his place. They made their way towards the school's front gate, and from a distance, Eiji suggested they keep going, but Ichijo pointed out that the gate was locked. Eiji's plan was simple. Just climb over it. But that clearly wouldn't have worked since she was wearing a skirt. Luckily, he knew about a middle side door that could only be opened from the inside. And once you were out, there was no way for you to get back in. Ichijo wanted to know how he knew such a thing. But as an honor student, skipping school had clearly never crossed her mind. Eiji asked if it wouldn't be so bad to break the rules.
Without
just this once. And taking her hand in his, he tucked her forward.
Not okay,
His
still,
face
but you know,
flushed red when
you know,
she
it's
asked
just one
why
of
he
the times
was
to take a
blushing,
picture of something.
wondering if it was really okay to be holding hands with a boy she just only
I do it all
met,
the time.
as it made her feel awkward.
Come on, look, we all did
Then
it.
again,
Not the only one.
in movies, this was normal. Right? She told him
So you
shyly
could say
that this was her
school,
first time holding
sometimes
hands with a guy,
the-
so he'd better take
but
care of it. He promised not
the
to
bear, but
overthink
you
it,
break
and
bread
then,
today.
hand in hand, they
Charge.
sprinted towards the gate. A teacher's
As long
shot
as I do it all the
behind
time,
them,
you get
but
it.
neither looked
Do it
back,
once in a
leaving
while.
behind the rain, the rooftop,
Just don't
and their
skip
broken
court dates.
pieces of yesterday. They ran forward together, towards something that might just be a future worth living for. She wondered why. Why is she trying to skip school with someone she just met? Even the words "I'll protect you," she's been told that so many times when she was being confessed to. And she didn't want to hear those words again, because it would only trigger her trauma. But somehow, Aono was different. He's such a good person that it all just makes her worry. But if she's with him, then maybe she'd be able to escape this current hell. But someplace else, the man who ruined Aono's life, Kondo Seiji, thinks the whole world revolves around him. It turns out that his father is the city
I knew it.
and because of that, he was able to get into a high-ranking school without much effort. And since then, he was able to become the ace of the soccer team, all while carrying his pathetic pathetic team to nationals. Not only that, but he had also been scouted by soccer teams from some private universities. You see, since childhood, he found himself to be different from others, being smart, tall, and talented at football.
He's got
So
superiority
of course it was
complex.
only natural he'd be popular with the ladies.
So
Bro had
because
been
that loser
suffering
guy
from
has think they just have
success so
superiority
much
complex now.
that ever since
Roll
the
and
third
get
grade,
around.
he's never
Yeah,
been
luckily
single,
they have
but
something.
always had a
But
girl
then say you
around
do
his
good
arms.
with it, you
He'll
just be a
never
fucking
forget the
asshole
time in
to
8th
everybody.
grade, the idol and the class
Everybody's
otaku
younger
were
being
dating,
make you
and
feel
with
better,
just
make
one
you feel
glance
bigger.
he knew they'd eventually end up marrying in the future. And that's when his hating ass knew that he had to end a perfectly fine
That's what they do.
relationship for no
Yeah,
apparent
because
reason.
they
And as
care about the girl,
expected,
just
she
like they want
easily fell for
to
it and
crush
got
somebody,
straight to
just make
dissing
them
her
feel
man,
big.
the otaku, behind closed doors, since he's so gross, and how having him as a boyfriend was the greatest shame of her life. But Kondo saw right through her. She's nothing more than a foolish woman, acting like a damsel in distress. To
Exactly.
him, there's no such thing as a soulmate, and he thought what the idol had said was so hilarious that he wanted to play a recording of their conversation to the otaku, and that's when he fell into despair. He genuinely believed her promise to marry him, and it was in that moment that Kondo felt alive. He was so satisfied, like he felt great. And not before long, the idol had broken up with the otaku, choosing Kondo as her new partner. And since then, Kondo has grown to love the game of stealing other men's women. It seems like the girls who usually fall for Kondo tend to stop studying after a while, causing their grades to jump right off of a cliff. And eventually, he had grown so tired of her that right as he entered high school, he just dumped her. But she
Yeah, that's how
wasn't
it be,
about to
yeah.
let go of him that easily. And
He's
from
like,
the
he's
look
like,
in
he's the
bro's
pet
face,
peeve, guy.
he don't give
He's
a
the pet.
damn.
Sometimes-
All while he tapped away on his phone,
Sometimes
he
you
wanted her
back
to know
back
that he
like that
really
because
hates loose
don't
women.
see that.
And now he began hating her after a while, so he wanted them to break up. Turns out in the end, the former class idol went from skipping school to calling it raps on life. But Kondo just watched and laughed as it all took place, since ruining both men and women's lives are incredibly fun to him. And his next target was none other than Miyuki. He had purposely grabbed onto her arm, twisting it, leaving a small bruise behind. And not long after, he approached two students and had to take pictures of it, sharing it
It'd be an
all
ass
over
whooping,
Twitter,
you know,
with the
because
caption
no
of
experience.
saving this girl from
So you
her
think
boyfriend,
he's counseling,
Aono.
yeah.
All while
Oh, wait,
Kondo
wait,
wonders
nope.
how far Eiji
Basically,
could
you're gonna
possibly
get nice ass
fall.
up
In the
to
present,
nice ass
Miyuki
chicken.
noticed Eiji hasn't come back since
He's
leaving
thinking
for the
strong
roof,
because
and wonders if
you
maybe he had quit
touchable,
school all
really
because
not.
of her.
He's like,
She
they're-
never
they're
once
real-
thought
they're real
Kondo would
guys.
go out of his way to spread such
He has a
rumors.
strong
And
demeanor, but
apparently, she had
shall-
tried to convince herself that she
we
didn't
shall
know
remind her
anything.
of
All while
which will
she
never be.
delusionally thought to herself that
You
it
always thought
couldn't
yourself
possibly
be
be that bad.
superior,
And it's
but actually
in
you're
that
not.
moment that she caught a glimpse of Eiji running towards the school gate and immediately beamed with gladness. But then noticed he was running
Oh
with another
no!
woman.
Here we
And
go.
get this, holding hands together. That happiness quickly turned into jealousy as she wonders why and who that homeworker of a woman could be.
Shut up! Do the homework.
From a different perspective, a teacher watched as both Eiji and Ichijo made their grand escape, and sighs as he's just glad Eiji's safe, revealing Takayanagi Sensei, Eiji's homeroom teacher. It seems like earlier that morning during homeroom, Sensei couldn't help but notice Eiji had been missing from class, but decided he'd just take the attendance first. He walks down the rows, calling each student's name, and spots the marking on his desk. Harsh words like die and get lost. He stopped for a moment to ask if anyone knew about Iono, with one student mentioning that Eiji did say he wasn't feeling well and went over to the nurse's office. And if that was the case, Sensei decided he'd go check up on Aono himself. And right as he opened their classroom door to leave, then came their school's nurse. There had been an urgent matter about Aono, and they couldn't find him anywhere. She even went as far as to blame herself for allowing him to leave the infirmary since something about him seemed strange to her, even after he told her he just wasn't feeling well. And so, she insists on searching the school until she finds him. Meanwhile, Takayanagi sensei decided to have a word with the vice principal, but unfortunately, their head principal seems to be held up at some assembly. So in the meantime, he'll just have to ask the students in detail what happened. And that's exactly what he did, because as soon as he sat back down in class, his eyes carried a stare sharp enough to kill, asking if they knew what property damage was. And immediately the classroom fell silent. But since everyone's playing dumb, he mentions that he's talking about Aono's desk. Sure, he might not know who did it, but he's guessing from what's written, along with Aono's condition, he has an idea what happened. He mentions how the desks are the school's property, so damaging that would be committing a crime. All while Miyuki sat there trembling in silence. They could use the excuse that it's all a prank, or that it's Aono's fault, but writing slanders on someone's desk isn't allowed. Especially since arrests have been made for death threats against celebrities. So there's no way they're getting out of this one. And while the class remains silent yet again, he places his hand down on his table, since this crime can't and won't be overlooked, and he needed them to remember that. About 30 minutes after Takayanagi sensei warns the class about bullying Aono, him and the other teachers sat together in the emergency conference room. While the principal apologized for being late, he bows before Takayanagi and thanks him for contacting them immediately, as nothing's more important than addressing this bad news. But Sensei sees it as a failure, since he wasn't able to manage his class in the first place. And honestly, all he could possibly do now is reflect on it. But as a teacher, there will always be things to reflect on. As their veteran teacher Iwai thinks he did everything he could, as there are plenty of people out there that would hide these kind of things to protect their reputation. And he's right, so now would be best to focus on the present and future rather than the past. The president wanted to know how Aono was doing after leaving school, and apparently Iwai sensei had already called his mom himself, asking if he was alright since he left feeling unwell. And thankfully, it seems he had made it home safely. And with that out of the way, their principal decided to share the policy he discussed with the vice principal. And their first order of business is to prioritize Aono, since if he ends up dropping out of school, everything will be lost. So they'll firmly support him during this time. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Kondo's on his phone texting his other hus, when two other students burst through the classroom door, reporting to Kondo that there was trouble. They wanted to punish Aono, so they ended up marking his desk. But now, Takayanagi was on their tail, and it seems Kondo might have had the wrong idea, as he always thought that depressing teacher was the type to cover things up. But still, it never really mattered to him, since even if this problem got too big, his pops would just deal with it anyway. And calmly responded, "I see." But such a response kind of felt a bit cold to them. After all, they did all of this for him, but he didn't ask them to do squat. And that's when the fear truly sunk in, because apparently all Kondo really did was share his worries with them. They're the ones who went ahead and spread those rumors like they were jokes. And not only that, but trashed the school's property as well. And once Barney knew he was about to go to jail, he tried to explain his actions. But Kondo simply responded that he should deny it. Deny it with everything he got, since it's not like they have any hard evidence on them anyway. Plus, if they don't, they finna have to put that booty up in prison. Hey, yo. And just like that, he got two more slaves under his belt. Meanwhile, elsewhere, tired and out of breath,
So-
Eiji asked if Ichijo was alright, but it seems she had a pretty tough time keeping up, especially since he had been running at full strength. But to him, just being able to keep up is amazing in and of itself. He heard that she had turned down every club that tried to recruit her, yet at the same time, when she was asked to help out in sports, she'd somehow perform at the level of an ace. How she truly must have both brain and brawn. And as he recommends they continue, she stopped him, since she's now realizing how much he teases her, wondering if he was truly bad at explaining himself, or was it that he was doing it on purpose. And of course he'd say the first one, but she already saw right through him. And shortly after, they went on their way. It didn't take long for them to make it to Aono's family's restaurant. And as he walked in, his mom couldn't help but notice that he was home early. And well, let's just say he wasn't feeling well. Not only that, but his junior was also leaving early, so he wanted to invite her out to lunch. And his mom picked up right away. Like, did you just say you was skipping school with a girl? Not bad. You see, for a little context, Kitchen Aono came to be because his late dad was a chef. He had trained at a really famous hotel to save on money, and when he fell in love with Eiji's mom, who helped him work the front desk, they opened a restaurant together. But now his older brother's the one in charge, while his mom handles all the accounting and waitressing. But back to the present, his mom lets him know that it'll get pretty busy soon, so they could use the break room to have lunch. And as Eiji thanks her, he opens the front door, letting Ichijo in, and she immediately pops her head out to peep, and softly introduces herself and apologizes for the sudden visit. And both his mom and brother couldn't believe their eyes, but mostly his mom, since she could only stand there speechless. And as Ichijo tried to fill the silence, his mom quickly apologized, as she never thought Eiji would bring home such a cute girl. Like, he really impressed her. But with that, she tells him to go ahead and relax. It's while they went ahead and sat down that Ichijo got right to business, asking if Eiji had any recommendations on the menu. And without a doubt, he thinks she should go for their special and signature dish, the omelet rice. And just from the image alone, she already knew it was going to be delicious. And after making their order, he apologized for the room being so plain. But apparently, she actually doesn't seem to mind all that much, since neither her family's home nor their apartment has Japanese themed rooms. Turns out they're currently sitting in his mom's and brother's break room, so the space is filled with hobbies. And it all makes a lot of sense to Ichijo, since that's why the room has such a warm feel to it. And from a glance, his family seems really close to the point she can't help but feel a bit jealous, as her family used to be that warm as well. But some time passes, and Mrs. Aono places their orders and thanks them for waiting. But not only that, but after their meal, she's also offering both tea and coffee on the house. So it's whichever she would like. And as soon as Ichijo mentioned tea, they both had a moment to bond, as she's also really into tea herself, which doesn't surprise Eiji in the slightest, as his mom had always been a tea lover. And as Mrs. Aono gets ready to leave yet again, she implores them to take their time, as she'll be back with the tea soon, and closes the door behind her. And as they both sat there together, they clasped their hands and dug right into their meal. And with each and every bite, Ichijo mutters that it's good. And it's a bit hard to believe that just a while ago they were both pretty much ready to end it all. She thinks the food is really delicious, especially the tanjiro. And apparently, it was all his dad's late special recipe, along with how his dad was always the type of father he could be proud of. She wonders if maybe she had misspoken and was being insensitive. But if anything, it all kind of feels like she's praising his father, and that just makes him really happy. Relieved, she couldn't help but mention that he must have been a kind father, as the Tanjiro tells her that much. And as he mentioned that he was glad to hear it, being able to get such a gentle food makes her feel really lucky, and is all kinda similar to an all-you-can-eat. But without warning, he asked if she deserved to live. Damn, that got dark really quick.
Man,
Apparently,
what
she's
the
been
heck,
agonizing
man?
over the thought
Yeah,
this
nice
whole
meal and
time.
shit. They
Even
just
going up
you
to
go
the
back to
rooftop
that.
was a hard decision for her. And when she finally thought she had gathered the guts to do it, then came Eiji. She met him, and he risked even his own life to save her. And now she's sitting with him, eating delicious food. But even now, that resolve of hers is wavering. He knows he has no clue what's going on in her life, and he's sure he'll only say something irresponsible. But regardless, it was because she was there why he was saved. And as the tears welled up in her eyes, he softly whispered that he wanted her to live.
God,
As up
bro,
until
she's winning
now,
in life.
she had carried everything with dignity. But after seeing her break down in tears like this, Eiji felt like he was finally seeing the true side of the girl Ichijo Ai. Eiji's mom walks in the room and apologized for the wait, placing down the tea Ichijo had ordered.
Fine,
As she
China,
thanks her, Eiji couldn't help but think
Good
how it
China.
seems Ichijo has calmed down now. Apparently, the tea was recommended by his mom and was flavored with some wine, but it's particularly delicious when you add a drop of sugar. And it's as Ichijo took a sip that she couldn't help but think it tasted delicious. Not only that, but it smelled really nice too. It's then that his mom couldn't help but get real close and snug, asking Ichijo what her favorite kind of tea was. All while Eiji sits afar off, watching as they both get to know each other a little better. But his mom couldn't help but confess how happy it made her talking to Ichijo. How it felt as if she were her own daughter, and she'd love if they could be friends as well. It's as Ichijo stared patiently back at her that she shortly after began to blush and shouted sure. It's then that she stood to her feet, mentioning that she'll be heading out. And if that's the case, Eiji recommends he follows her out to the station, but she insists that she'll be fine. Since she'd been having such a great time with him lately, it would only make her feel lonelier later. And it's in that moment that Eiji couldn't help but turn away from her. But she reassures him that it's okay, since meeting him gave her a reason to keep on living. But then she ended up turning away from him as well, because now she had a question of her own, asking if maybe they were friends now. And as a smile grew across his face, he also reassured her that of course they were. And if that's the case, she wants him to keep looking after her from now on. It's shortly after walking home that Ichijo couldn't help but think how that might have been the happiest time of her life. But her smile quickly faded and her cheeks deepened in color as she wondered if just being friends would be fine.
No, it's
When
not, bro.
suddenly, a car had driven right up to her as her chauffeur lets her know he came to pick her up. And that's when the light faded from her eyes, as she walked over to him and thanked him for coming. Back at Kitchen Aono, Eiji closes the door to his room, and the moment he exhaled, a jolt of terror surged through his body, and he could have sworn he was fine. But now he can't stop himself from trembling. He fell to the floor, wondering what he'd do starting tomorrow, and he can only imagine how horrible it's going to be. It was only because of Ichijo that he was able to forget the pain. And who would have thought she'd been the one to save him? When just then, he got a notification on his phone, and he figured it must have been someone else from his school trying to humiliate him. But then his eyes widened when he noticed a text from Imai Satoshi, apologizing as his phone had been broken while he was on the trip. And it's as he stared at the message, he remembered how close the three of them were: Miyuki, Satoshi, and himself. He sent a message back that he'll manage somehow. But Satoshi sent him a message shortly after, since he'd like them both to meet up at their usual family restaurant. And it's while he yet again stared at the message that he thought about all his clubmates, classmates, and everyone else who turned on him. But yet, Satoshi didn't seem to get it. He still treated him the way he always has. And that alone makes him really happy. And as Eiji sent a message back, confirming their plans
he's a
to
real
meet,
friend.
it was shortly after at the kitchen Aono that we're introduced to Imai Satoshi. They both get to sitting down when Eiji couldn't help but realize how he had gotten there quick. And of course he would, since they're friends after all. He had heard that there were a few rumors going around, and he wanted to apologize to Eiji for not noticing how bad things had gotten. He had failed him as a friend, and wonders how he could ever forgive him. He doesn't really use social media, so he didn't realize the strange rumors spreading. And with his class splitting and his club trips being a thing, he hadn't found out about it until now. Yet, in the end, all he can offer are excuses, since the fact still remains that he wasn't there by his side when he was at his lowest. And as Satoshi began to raise his head, Eiji asked him why he chose to believe him. But Satoshi knew right from the jump that they were all just lies. A junior in his club had showed him the post, but Eiji had never once laid hands on anyone, and he knew he wasn't the kind of person who would. Besides, the supposed person he'd be hurting would be Miyuki, so he knew this had to be some kind of mistake. Not only that, Takayanagi sensei had also been pretty worried about Eiji as well, because when Satoshi had went to ask more about Eiji and where he was, they apparently mentioned that he had left earlier that day. And with all those rumors going around, Satoshi wasn't left to go off much. But he thanked them anyway, leaving him no other choice but to get information elsewhere. And once his target was acquired, he approached Takayanagi sensei in a desperate hurry. He heard that Aono had left early, and at this rate, if anyone's trying to cover something up about Eiji, he'd personally be the one to punch him. But shockingly, Takayanagi sensei had met his desperation, requesting that if Satoshi knew anything, even something small about what happened, he'd want him to tell him. As we all know, Takayanagi sensei had only grasped the situation that morning, so he's been digging around for information, but hasn't been able to find out anything. And if that's the case, Satoshi mentioned that he'll tell him everything he knows. And as he pulled out his phone, he showed Sensei all the tweets that were going around online. And with that, Takayanagi wanted to know if it were possible for him to tell Aono something for him. He knows it may be scary, but he can rely on the adults to solve the problem. So even if it were just a little, he'd want him to believe in them. And who would have thought Takayanagi sensei was so passionate? And as Eiji sat there, his tears began to flow more freely than he ever could control. But meanwhile, running towards Eiji's family's restaurant, Miyuki pants as she desperately wants to apologize. As she stood before Kitchen Aono's front door, she prepared herself to go in. As Miyuki ran towards Eiji's house, memories rushed in of the countless moments they had shared. How he had proudly held her hand when they were kids, and how fiercely she herself had worked to let their bond grow into something more. But as she thought about the smile he had once carried, she desperately wants to take it all back and reclaim a happy future with Eiji. As she approached his family restaurant, she hid behind a pillar, hoping to peek inside before entering. But what she saw shocked her, as she never expected to see Ichijo Ai there, and it had her wondering what the school's idol was doing at Eiji's house. But as she watched Ichijo interact with him and his family, she noticed a warm smile slowly spreading across Ichijo's face, and there was no doubt about it. The look on her face was unmistakably that of a woman in love, while delusionally thinking that she is the only person who understands Eiji's charm. So why then, of all the people out there, the one that had taken a liking to him was Ichijo Ai? And at this point, if she doesn't hurry, Eiji will be taken from her. She lingered at the edge, peeking out as she gathered the courage to step forward. She thought about how inferior she was to Ichijo. After all, She's an exceptional student who comes from a noble family, entering into their school with a nearly perfect entrance score. And not only that, but she excelled at sports and was flawless in every way, truly embodying the title of the perfect woman. And on top of that, she's known for hating boys, rejecting every single one that dared to confess to her. And as she took her first step forward, someone called out to her, asking what the hell she was doing there. Now standing face to face with Eiji's mom. And just going based off how she had addressed her, she wondered if maybe she already knew about what she did, but also thought maybe Eiji had told her. She tried to ask where he was, but his mother had interrupted her midway through, mentioning that he was inside. But again, what did she want? And as Miyuki stumbles over her words, trying to explain herself, his mom had cut her off again. Since, honestly, as his mother, she doesn't want to interfere in his relationship. But at this point, she doesn't have a choice. Miyuki tries to play dumb by asking what it was she could even mean. But his mom claps back that it should be obvious, since she knows exactly what she did. She cheated on him, and she saw it all go down before Eiji ever did. She first noticed when she was having tea at the shopping center, when suddenly she had turned and saw Miyuki holding hands with some guy who wasn't Eiji. She figured that sometimes people just grow apart, and since the two weren't married, legally speaking, they were able to do whatever it was they wanted. Plus, they were both in high school, so hurting each other could easily happen at any time. So she figured Eiji probably just stayed silent about it, because it was hard for him to say that they had broken up out loud. And back then, she really did feel sorry for both of them, thinking that they had at least ended things properly and cleanly. But sadly, she was mistaken. It was on Eiji's birthday in chapter 1, and he had decided to go out even though Miyuki had cancelled their date to the movies. And once he had returned back home, he only rushed right past her without saying a word. And that's when she knew she had betrayed Eiji. Miyuki tries to explain that it's not like that. But Eishi's mom didn't have a reason to hear her excuses. She really doesn't want to hate her any more than she already does. So she asked her to stop with her meaningless excuses, leaving Miyuki no other choice but to whisper an apology. But again, she was done with hearing her weak lies. They have known each other for over 10 years and thought she'd give her one final advice before she goes. All is fear and love and war, but no one has the right to toy with or trample on someone's pure feelings. Sure, what she did might not have been a crime, but to her, what Miyuki did was an even greater sin. So from now on, she wants Miyuki to live her life in a way that she can be proud of. And while Miyuki trembles, pleading with her to please let her see Eiji, she deadass looked her in her eyes and told her, hell no. Asking if she really thought that in this world, there's a single mother who would forgive a woman who betrayed and trampled on the feelings of her precious son. But still, it's all up to Eiji and what he decides to do. No. But get right, as for her, get right. This is the last time she ever wants to see her face again. While reminding her that she doesn't deserve her son, make her feel like she did nothing wrong, to stream down her cheek, she thought surely all those times she had spent together with Eiji and his family. But now it was all gone as she fell to her feet, whispering beneath her breath that it wasn't too late. But seeing someone as pathetic as her grovel before her restaurant honestly won't be good for business. So she tells Miyuki to get out of there, and while heading inside, says her final goodbyes and closes the door behind her. Knelt down before Kitchen Aono Miyuki has now realized that she cannot go back, and as she picked herself up and walked through the empty streets, she shortly after made it home. Waiting to welcome her back was her mother, who noticed she had returned home earlier than usual, and her excuse was simple. Eiji didn't seem to be feeling well.
Damn, you
And to
didn't
her
say your
mom,
mother.
it seems as though the two are still a lovey-dovey
You wouldn't say your
couple.
mother.
Actually, just
That's how
thinking
you
about it
know
makes me
you're
really
guilty.
glad. Ever since they were little, Miyuki always told her that she'd be Eiji's bride, and how glad she is that her own daughter has such a wonderful youth. Her mother's remark left a deafening silence as Miyuki gritted her teeth and answered reluctantly. And as she trembles from the frustration, she requested that her mother no longer reminds her of such an embarrassing thing, and quickly after mentions that she has a test coming up, so she's off to go study. It's as she rushed through her bedroom door and closed it behind her, the revelation finally struck. That it's not just Eiji and his mom that she betrayed, but she betrayed her own mother as well. And it was in that moment that the whispers that had once haunted Eiji had began to taunt her as well. She knows she's the worst, and wonders why she keeps betraying those she cares about, while also factoring in that it's too late to care about Eiji, or pretend she's innocent, although in her opinion, she didn't cheat. Kondo's the one who framed and isolated Eiji, but all that doesn't seem to matter because she'll never believe him or forgive her. And as she opened her bedside door, she took a piece of paper out, and while looking down to work, there was a photo of Eiji on their very first day of school, and that alone had caused her to break down. As she pulled the photo even closer to her chest,
you really care about it, tell everybody the truth.
She declared that she had to do this,
But you don't.
and sent Kondo a message, letting him know that she wanted to see him, as the only other choice left for her is to truly become a despicable woman. The very next day, Eiji woke up feeling nauseous, but regardless, he announced that he was about to head out. And as he opened the front door, none other than Ichijo was standing right in front of him, wishing him a good morning. And right as he laid eyes on her, he shut the door immediately, with his face completely red. But Ichijo was about to step aside and asked him why he had closed the door suddenly, since he could have sworn they would go to school together, especially since she woke up early just for it. And immediately his mom recognized her voice, knowing that she had came just to pick him up, and urges him to go on already. And while placing her hand on his shoulder, she gave him one last push, with Eiji deciding within himself that it was time to go. And without wasting time, Eiji's mom swung the door wide open, as she welcomed Ichijo for coming all this way. And now that she thinks about it, they're having oyster fry later that day, and plans a date on the spot for both Ichijo and Eiji later that night, as her meals are always free for both of them. And without delay, Ichijo mentions that she loves oyster fry, but at the same time, she ain't no brokey, so they should expect her to pay properly next time. And with such a remark, his mother can't help but be impressed, as Ichijo seems really responsible. And with that, she's looking forward to later that night, as Eiji's mom slaps him on his back, letting him know that he should be going. And finally, they announced that they were leaving. And as she watched them both walk off, she wished them a good day. While on their way to school, the two made small talk, as Ichijo asked if by any chance he likes to eat cakey fried oysters. Personally though, she's on Team Worcestershire sauce for cakey fry. Although, when she wants something refreshing, adding a bit of lemon or even chili sauce could be delicious as well. And now that Eiji thinks about it, it's all thanks to Ichijo walking to school with him that his fear has decreased quite a bit. However, there is something bothering him, as he noticed a group of girls just a distance away from them, whispering to themselves, and before he knew it, a crowd had formed around them, with everyone wondering why Ichijo would be walking with that guy. And just maybe, he had forced her. So as he turned his focus towards Ichijo, he asked her if it was really okay, since if she's with him, wouldn't they all just bully her too? But with a smug grin, Ichijo's actually quite confident that that wouldn't happen, since she's pretty popular after all. And now that Eiji thinks about it, he has never heard any bad rumors about her. Even when she would be confessed to, she simply apologized, thanking the other person for even considering her. And actually, if they'd like to, they could still continue on as just friends. Sure, she mercilessly rejects everyone's confession, but she always follows up with a sincere apology and seems to not hold any hard feelings. Not to mention she's also kind, caring, and popular with the girls as well. And so proceeding forward, Ichijo thinks he should use everything in his arsenal, since as long as he's walking with her, then it will be a lot safer. Or at the very least, it might stop other people from talking crap about him to his face. And if all goes according to plan, today's rumor about both of them being together should override everything that had gone wrong before. Since, you know, girls tend to gossip about love affairs. But not only that, but she had also taken a liking to him. Not that she'd actually say it, but Eiji quickly cuts her off, as he doesn't want her reputation to drop because of him. And it's as she stopped for a moment to stare back at him, she noticed how truly kind Eiji was, as he's been quite considerate of her. But in her opinion, she doesn't need a reputation that would drop just for walking to school with a close friend. As people who direct malice without knowing Eiji's character properly, she wouldn't want anything to do with those people. And just that declaration alone had Eiji thinking how amazing she was. But in her opinion, it's still too early to cry. Instead, they should wait until everything is over, and only then would they be allowed to cry together. And thanks to Satoshi, he found his resolve to go to school. And thanks to Ichijo, he gained the determination he needed to fight together. And with this newfound confidence, he feels like he could believe in people once more. It's once they had finally made it to school that Ichijo asked if by any chance she could walk home with him again today. But Eiji wanted to ask if that was really okay with her. Yet there was no reason for him to ask, since she had been the one to bring it up in the first place. And just like before, whispers surrounded them again, as everyone began to question what the two had been doing together. And it's then that he realized that she not only protected him on his way to school, but she had plans to do the same on their way back. And with that realization, he thanks her. But of course, she factored in her keiki fry as well. And as she made her way to class, he was left all alone again, as the darkness slowly crept in. And as he made his way towards his locker, he remembered upon opening it, death notes had fallen to his feet. So as he reached out his hand, he opened it and noticed his locker had actually been completely clean. When just then, he heard someone wish others a good morning. And as Eiji turned around, he noticed his teacher Iwai-sensei, and noticed right away that he must have been keeping watch. But before anything else, he mentioned that he should go on and meet Takayanagi-sensei in the staff room, as he's actually been worried about him since yesterday. And as he watched him walk off, he couldn't help but smile. But now, he can't help but think how going into the staff room would probably mean that he'd stand out, and he simply just doesn't like that. Not only that, but there are probably other teachers who had suspected him in there as well. Yet when he had turned the corner, he saw Takayanagi-sensei, and upon greeting him, he wondered why Sensei had been standing outside. And well, simply put, he figured that Eiji would have more than likely had a hard time walking into the staff room alone. So he figured he might as well meet him halfway. And as Eiji thanks him, his sensei mentioned that it was simply the bare minimum, and insisted for now that they should meet in a room across from them. But that left Eiji a bit confused, because why weren't they going into the guidance counselor's office? And well, to be honest, that place has an atmosphere where the teacher's holding a superior position. This time, however, he wanted to talk with Eiji on equal footing. It's as they made it in and sat down together, Takayanagi wanted to say something before they started. As he truly felt really sorry, he failed to notice the unusual state yesterday, and allowed Eiji to go through such a painful moment. The truth is, he bears some of that responsibility as well, and for that, he is truly sorry. It was in a panic that Eiji asked him to raise his head, as he actually didn't consult with anyone either. so he's also at fault. And the fact that he noticed so quickly is actually quite amazing in and of itself. But in complete honesty, he heard a bit about it from Satoshi yesterday, so he roughly understands the situation and asked if he could please tell him everything that had happened. But as he thought about his question, everything from before started rushing in. The total mockery of him
Well, don't do
snitching
it. Look,
and how he had
you
been
got
playing the
you got
victim.
you. It's
But
okay.
stopping him right then and there, Takayanagi-sensei apologized as he never meant to rush into things, mentioning that he doesn't need to force himself as there was truly no need for them to get into it today. Before shortly after standing to his feet and asked if Aono was thirsty. To be honest, it's not normally allowed, but today he'll make an exception. And without delay, Aono mentions that he wanted a cola. But now that he thinks about it, it's almost first period, and they both have classes that they need to go to. But apparently, Takayanagi-sensei had already taken care of it, as first period's history is being covered by the vice principal. And since he had taught the subject before, there was really nothing to be worried about, as right now the school's top priority is to support him, the one who's currently suffering the most. And as tears began to brim and shimmer in his eyes, he shortly after thanked him for everything. Before he knew it, Takayanagi-sensei had already came back with his drink. And believe it or not, it's way too hot out today, so he'll definitely be breaking his sugar restriction and drink as well. But turning towards him, Aono wanted to ask why Sensei had chosen to believe him. And well, there were actually two reasons. One being that most students like to indulge in dumb rumors, while the adults, since they're a little bit more mature, are able to look at the situation more objectively, reminding him of a show called Flame Wars, and how from the perspective of the people online, the person who's absolutely getting cooked is often seen as evil, tricking themselves into thinking that they're the just ones, all while hurling terrible slanders. But often the one who started the flame is usually unknown. And in times like this, people are quick to spread rumors and quicker to hurt others, not factoring in that they themselves lose everything as well. And funnily enough, they don't even notice what they've lost until it's too late. And let's just say that the ones that are currently harassing Aono fall into that exact category. But being intrigued, Aono asked what if he was really the guy the rumors said he was. And well, that was definitely considered, and also goes into Sensei's second point, how no matter what kind of trouble Aono seems to get caught up in, he doesn't look like the type of person who resorts to violence. Not only that, but he doesn't seem like the type of person who would also deserve this kind of harassment. But let's just say, it was a teacher's intuition. And as Aono slowly bowed his head, his hands began to tremble as he called out to Takayanagi-sensei, mentioning that there was something he wanted to consult with him about. But before he did, he wanted to ask Sensei if he knew he had been dating Miyuki. And taking a moment to think about it, he actually did. On August 31st, his birthday, he had plans to hang out with her, but she had suddenly said she couldn't make it. So he found himself walking alone through town, and that's when he saw them, both Miyuki and Kondo walking together. In all honesty, he ended up grabbing onto Miyuki's arm while confronting her, but he genuinely didn't think he used that much force. So when she had remarked that it hurt, Kondo had suddenly punched him right in the face, and began shouting that Aono was this violent stalker bastard. And it didn't take long for Takayanagi-sensei to catch on to Kondo's plans, as what followed after was Kondo asking Miyuki to choose between him or Aono. And in the end, Miyuki chose Kondo. And so while placing his hand on Aono's shoulder, Takayanagi-sensei mentions that it must have been really painful, while also thanking Aono for telling him before shortly after locking in, as he thought about Kondo Seiji. He is the ace of the soccer club, and his grades aren't that bad either. Sure, he acts like a clean-cut nice guy, but he's far from a model student. Like, bro's notoriously known for having way too many relationship problems, and his reputation among the teachers isn't all that great either. And so, judging from Aono's condition, he probably didn't go to the hospital after getting sucker punched. So sadly, they wouldn't have any doctor diagnosis or evidence. And knowing Kondo, he'll probably gloss over it or try to justify his actions. So going forward, they'll need to collect
me,
even more
they
information
be
so that they can
keeping the
expose him.
dark so
And so
long, so
from
he's
now
allowed.
on, the adult will be the one to handle this situation. Starting now, their top priority is to protect Aono's school life, but forcing him to attend school might not work out in his favor, as the class might just direct their malice towards him, leaving even more emotional scars. And so the victim choosing between dropping out or skipping school genuinely wouldn't solve their problem. So instead, they decided to host makeup classes and assignments for Aono just in case. Still, the longer this drags on, he's just gonna be in a tougher situation. And so when Aono had suddenly apologized for causing so much trouble for everyone, Takayanagi had genuinely been shocked, before shortly after grabbing onto his shoulder, affirming that this is a problem both for him and the entire school. So when teachers step in to handle things, it shouldn't be considered trouble at all. And also, he's been taking way too much responsibility for everything that happened. How he simply is just too kind for his own good, causing him to think back to Ichijo, as it's because he's so kind that others want to rely on him as well. Sure, liking and having feelings for someone is nice and all, but if those feelings are trampled on, even an adult would be torn apart. So he should remember that all the teachers are worried about him, as well as that if he wants, he should talk to friends like Satoshi and his family. And of course, he shouldn't forget that he has Takayanagi sensei by his side as well. So when it's painful, he should try to consider putting himself first. And with a blissful smile, Aono agrees. While walking through the school's halls, Takayanagi sensei mentions that in the meantime, Aono should rest up in the nurse's office instead of going to class, as he'll be sure to get his makeup lesson starting tomorrow. It's while Aono thanked him for everything, he slowly slid open the infirmary's door, and waiting there for him was none other than Mitsui sensei. She mentions that it must have been really rough for him. Sure, his body might be fine, but he went through something pretty awful, so she urges him not to push himself. And all this feels very reassuring to him, knowing that the teachers are trying their best to look out for him, especially Takayanagi sensei. But she swiftly changes the topic as she mentions how spending 7 hours in the nurse's office is gonna be pretty boring. And since she had borrowed some books from the library, she asked if maybe he wanted to borrow some to distract himself. And she might have been onto something, because if he doesn't do something right now, the weight of his negative feelings might just crush him. So at all costs, he wanted to keep busy. And while looking up towards her, he asked if it was really okay, but her only condition was that he doesn't make it too obvious, as this was going to be their little secret, just between them. It wasn't long after that while he sat and read, she approached him and realized that he had already finished some of her books already, before shortly after asking if he wanted to take a break, as she could make them a cup of tea. And as she passed him a cup, Aono suddenly turned and asked why she had become a teacher in the first place, before shortly after apologizing since the question had seemed to come out of nowhere. But honestly speaking, getting her teaching license was more like a safety net for her, as she didn't really have anything in particular that she wanted to do, while also admitting that she probably shouldn't be saying this to a student. But since it's just the two of them, then she doesn't seem to mind, leading Aono to ask if maybe she had become a teacher right after graduating college. And that doesn't seem to be the case, because she had actually joined a regular company first, and later had transferred to this school about 5 years ago, which comes as a complete shock to him, as he could have sworn she had been a teacher this whole time. And well, she thought she wanted to be a teacher in college, but had given up on that dream not long after. But when she had noticed a concerned look on Aono's face, she reassured him that it's fine. After all, it's something she can talk about, so he shouldn't worry about it at all. But in a way, you could say that she ran away. You see, even though she had a lot of fun teaching and was told she was very good at it, she was still afraid. Since a teacher is able to easily change a child's future with just one word, and that responsibility was simply too much for her to bear. And it was in that instant, fear had gripped her, leaving Aono to ask if she was still afraid. And well, to be honest, she definitely is, especially since in her opinion, he's at the most important stage of his life. When she was back at her old job, she was struggling with managing a work relationship, and in the end, she had gotten completely worn out because of it. But yet, regardless of how she felt, she would keep pushing forward. The harder she pushed, the more it wore her down, bringing her closer and closer to the edge. It was at such a low point in her life that she felt as if she couldn't talk to anyone about how she felt, driving herself further into a corner alone. And eventually she collapsed from overworking herself and ended up in the hospital. When she had woken up, her mother was crying right by her side, apologizing as she wished she had noticed sooner. And since Mitsui had been living alone, there was no way for her mother to notice something was wrong. And immediately Aono thought about his own mother. Mitsui's sensei continued on how her mother had gotten upset with her for not coming to her in the first place, and how she at least wanted to be there for her. And it was in that moment that Aono knew that he would have ended up the same way. And if the others hadn't noticed, he'd still be forcing himself to sit through classes, putting himself through this torture. And as he lowered his head yet again, Mitsui's sensei reaffirmed him that he'll be okay, as they're all here for him. About 4 hours ago, Ichijo stood in front of her classroom door, and upon opening it, everyone in her class had stopped as they stared back at her with concern, as she suddenly remembered that she skipped both classes in school yesterday. It's then that one of her classmates had approached her, as she nervously mentions that she heard she wasn't feeling well. And well, she had the opportunity to rest up yesterday, as she was feeling just a bit overheated. And that seemed to have made a lot of sense to her friend, as she wanted not to push herself too hard. But she doesn't know that Ichijo wears a mask at school. Sure, she's kind to everyone, but she also tries to keep her distance.
The same I don't know because he's trying to push towards abuse of him of this opposed rumor. And instead of just reaching out to somebody who can be there for him to walk him through it, you gotta take that way all by himself to just push him to the point where he just can't do it anymore. It's just how funny how other people can not have go to the same thing, but we can just have the same thing in common, them understanding why.
At least that way she won't be isolated while also not giving anyone the wrong idea. Don't get her wrong though, because she really does think of herself as a pain, as what she really wants is to be able to rely on someone. But in the end, she ended up cornering herself like she did yesterday, thinking that at school she has to play the role of Ichijo Ai, the person everyone expects her to be, but deep down inside,
talk on that. Yeah, it's like the same thing when you be in like these toxic ass relationships. You always just keep pushing forward in that relationship. You think it's gonna be some kind of change, but it's never gonna be some kind of change. That person shouldn't. So I didn't talk about the women. It's not just the women thing. Men can go through it. Everybody can go through it. It's the same thing you be in a toxic ass relationship. Is that you be so busy trying to push forward and ignore the abuse that overwhelm you. You just lose every bit of yourself day by day to the point where you just feel like complete shit. And you just feel nothing like you feel like complete shit. Just a rope, just like a blank at that point. There's nothing wrong if you're going through something. Just talk to somebody. Like I said before, not too long ago, I might talk to somebody what I'm going through. Rather than see me cry than watch me get buried. Yeah, that's some tough shit.
Really felt pathetic, as she struggles to figure out who she was as a person. But then again, no one ever took the time to figure that out, not even her own parents. But then came one person who changed everything for her, the upperclassman she met just yesterday, who became her best friend. And with him, she could be her true self, the part of her that even she didn't know exist. It's because of him that she began to see a different side.
The right person just to bring you right out of the shell. It's kind of funny how they both brought themselves out of their shells over some shared pain. Before they both about to end it all, but I guess it took them both to realize that there's life even after trauma. The fact that they both rely on each other, it makes them just be themselves. Ooh, I want to trick myself. He's got
to her. Like she had no idea she could laugh like that. And when she's walking with him, nothing seems to hurt anymore. Knowing Aono, he probably thinks she's trying to be a shield, protecting him from everyone. But the one who's actually protecting her heart is him. And that's why she thinks she wants to spend as much time as possible with the people who truly matter to her the most. But having something else on her mind, her friend had one last thing she wanted to ask. And well, you see, she actually saw it. That both Ichijo and that upperclassman were walking together, and immediately Ichijo knew that she was referring to Aono. And with that confirmation alone, the classroom had begun to mutter, as an uproar suddenly began, claiming that they knew it, while also asking why she would hang out with the upperclassman who's known for his violent incident. But it wasn't that big of a deal since she had only just gone over to his place and walked to school with him. But that alone had caused even more concern, as they had no idea they were that close. When one student in particular began to exclaim asking Ichijo if she even knew about the rumors that were going around about this guy. But she simply mentioned that she did. And if that's the case, then he wanted to know why. Why would she try to be around someone who simply isn't good enough for her? But calling out to the young man Maehira, she asked if by any chance he had ever spoken to Aono directly. And well, to be honest, he hasn't, which is totally fine, which means that he must have personally witnessed all the things Aono did. But bro hadn't seen that either, and well, simply put, Aono isn't the kind of person that those rumors would make him out to be. And she simply knows him better than anyone, especially since she's his best friend. She'd even go as far as to say that he's someone she owes a great debt to. So she kindly requested that he doesn't say such careless things again.
Hey,
She really hates people who just pile on other people just because they're disliked, without even knowing them, and how she simply hates it. And without a second thought, Maehira began to apologize, which had completely taken her by surprise, causing her to shortly after apologize as well for being so harsh. But that seemed to have left a nasty taste on everyone's tongue, as they yet again began to whisper amongst themselves. But since Ichijo wasn't necessarily hiding it, it really didn't matter to her at all. But if anything, she only feels bad she drew another student into her little scheme. You see, she knows that if Aono is proven innocent, it's still gonna be pretty hard to erase all that bad reputation. And since she doesn't want to see him suffer from it for the rest of his life, she wants to override it with her own positive rumor. Since if it's something she can do for herself, then she'll do anything.
So if they're
Not
proving that
long
it didn't
after,
happen,
Kondo
then
couldn't
the
help
case will
but
be
think to
over.
himself that this was all such
That's
a
our
drag.
rumor.
Just because there was a match coming up, he had to be out here doing morning practices. But when he witnessed one of his own teammates being juked out by one of their opponents, it had genuinely set him off. Since if they keep this up, there's no way they're going to be winning nationals. Since if they lose here, then it will definitely put a stain on his career. And since he's the king of this team, he simply cannot allow that to happen. He's even being excused from playing defense since he's their ace when it comes down to offense. And honestly, just watching his opponent scramble for the ball was so lame to him, thinking to himself that he could never be the type to waste energy on such a boring role as defense, as he simply wouldn't be able to pull off his artistic attacks. And as he himself had been out here in the field breaking ankles, he turned to look behind him at his opponent, thinking how he was utterly pathetic. Speaking of pathetic, it reminded him of Aono Eiji, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had come back to school, and how he's looking forward to toying with him and seeing how long he lasts. And since rumors about him are starting to spread like wildfire, once his reputation drops real low, it'll be a wrap for him. And as Kondo scores a goal, he couldn't help but think about something that was even better than torturing Aono. As just last night, Miyuki approached him mentioning that her parents weren't home, and how she simply wanted him to make her forget everything. And before they knew it, they had already been in bed together. As Miyuki mentions that she finally gets it now. That there's absolutely no going back to how things were between her and Aono. How Kondo is all she has now. And as he embraced her tightly, he thought that this girl was done for. That just like Aono, she'll be in the trenches soon enough too. But instead, he whispered in her ear that it was okay, that he'll always be with her no matter what.
Man.
And as Miyuki thanked him, Kondo was already making plans. Then maybe he'll break up with Miyuki and move on to another woman. But that wasn't all, since he also gave Miyuki advice on how to handle the upcoming teachers' meeting, thinking that that should be enough for now. But still, that moment when a pretty face gets dyed in despair, it's absolutely the best. Thinking that he can't wait for them both to break. It's when he had been completely done with practice that one of his juniors came up to him, wanting to show him something on his phone, and Kondo couldn't believe his eyes as he stared at a photo of both Aono and Ichijo walking together, and he had genuinely been lost for words.
Damn.
As he heard the others around him talk about the two spending time together, and it had caused Kondo's blood to boil, as he wondered if it was really Ichijo Ai. Thinking back to when he had actually approached her, apologizing for suddenly interrupting, and as if he wanted to grab coffee with him on their way home. You see, he had noticed her during the entrance ceremony and thought she was actually pretty cute. And ever since then, he's been wanting to talk with her. But shutting him down right there on the spot, Ichijo suddenly apologized, as going out with a guy she doesn't really know is honestly really scary.
Man.
So that's gonna be
You got your girl for you,
it had left
man.
him
They got
wondering
hurt, bro.
why this girl had brushed him off to be with a loser like Aono, while also wondering why he had put up with such humiliation, as he is the king of this school. But it really didn't matter, as he'll be the one to make them understand even more the difference in their standing. While sitting alone in his interrogation room, Takayanagi-sensei wonders how he should handle this. It was Mitsui-sensei who had requested that Aono stays with her in the infirmary, while he, on the other hand, coordinates with the other teachers for Aono's supplementary lessons. And as he reflects on the conversation they had before, he wanted to apologize for putting Aono in this situation. But in Eishi's opinion, he should be the one thanking Takayanagi. So when his sensei mentions that they should inform his parents about what had been going on, Aono simply replied that there was no way he'd be willing to. And who could blame him? He probably doesn't want to worry his mother, who raised him alone, nor his brother, who works really hard to protect his family's business. So for now, Takayanagi decided to back down, while also thinking that he can't leave them in the dark, since if something were to happen later on, it would be too late, as it's the teacher's responsibility to share these things as soon as possible. Admitting that they might have found themselves in a bit of a sticky situation. Of course, from an adult's perspective, they'd want to contact his parents as soon as possible. But they also would like to respect Aono's wishes, thinking that they really are just a bunch of amateurs when it comes on to this emotional problem. So for now, they decided to leave it in Mitsui-sensei's hands, while also making arrangements for a school counselor to come in. But in the meantime, if he is able to at least share his burdens with Mitsui-sensei, then they're sure that he'll be a bit more at ease, which only encourages Takayanagi-sensei to do whatever he can to help him. And that brings us back to the present at Shimokawa's interview, the second-year student who's also in the soccer club with Kondo. So right as he was about to take his seat, Takayanagi-sensei apologizes for calling him in so suddenly. You see, he was one of the students at the top of his list that he wanted to speak with today. Thinking back to yesterday, he confirmed with the class representative that when she arrived in class at around 8 a.m., the markings on Aono's desk were already there. So it had to have been someone who arrived at school before the class representative, which means that it's likely a club member that practices in the morning, which would naturally narrow down his suspects. It turns out that yesterday he also spoke with students who weren't a part of any clubs. But, just think of it as him being extra cautious. After all, that is what he's here for. And being able to put things together, Shimokawa asked if this was by any chance related to Aono's incident.
And he's already you know what it was.
But of course he wasn't. Since when he asked the other students that arrived early, they said the markings were already there. Which is why he needed to ask the members of the sports club some questions. And at this point, Shimokawa can tell that he's been working really hard. But there was no need for him to continue because it definitely wasn't him. You see, the members of the soccer club go straight to the locker room without passing any classrooms. So when they got to the class that morning, they themselves had been shocked by what had happened. And if that's the case, then by any chance before practice, did they happen to see anyone beforehand? And with a slightly concerned look on his face, Shimokawa averted his gaze as he mentioned, no, while adding that the other person was more than likely Ada. And as Takayanagi-sensei's eyes sharpened, Shimokawa felt the urge to defend himself, since if Sensei was going to suspect him, then he'd better have proof. And well, of course. Funnily enough though, Ada said the same thing, and gracefully smiled as he thanked him for telling him his side of the story.
Damn, he set him up.
Done, he was more than welcome to go back to class. And as Shimokawa closed the door behind him, Sensei had been left alone, before shortly after letting out a sigh. Why is it that those two gave the exact same testimony? It's almost as if they didn't even bother to try and hide it. And without a doubt, those two were suspicious. It wasn't only the content, but even their orders of answers felt rehearsed. Not to mention the part where they demanded proof were identical. And because of another eyewitness, Takayanagi can now confirm that someone saw both Shimokawa and Ada before their practice, while wondering to himself what he should do next. Next up was an interview with Amada Miyuki, and once again Takayanagi apologizes for calling her in so suddenly, leaving her to also figure that this was a meeting in relation to Aono. You see, Miyuki is Aono's childhood friend, and aside from Kondo, she also probably knows all of Aono's secrets. She's an excellent student and was the class representative last semester. She is both pretty and popular with the boys, and not once did Sensei see her as the type of person who would betray Aono. But yet again, love is like a drug that drives people insane. There had been so many historical figures throughout history who would allow love to cause them to crash and burn. And if these men weren't able to get a handle on it, then of course some teenage girl would also fall victim. And who knows, maybe that's also a reason why Takayanagi will never get married. Mostly though because he's the type of nerd who organizes his thoughts using historical examples. But calling out to him, Miyuki stood to her feet as she claims that she had absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm gonna get freaked out.
Nagi Sensei
Yeah,
by
you supposed-
surprise.
you most
She
likely
knows that he called her in because he had suspected her, while admitting that it's true that both her and Aono had problems because of their breakup. But it's also because Aono had completely misunderstood a situation when he saw her walking with Kondo. But when she noticed the uproar she caused, she decided to take back her seat, before shortly after continuing that Eiji had been the one to lose control, and tried pulling her away from Kondo by grabbing her arm. But that had actually been completely different from what Aono had told him. And as Miyuki froze, she mentioned that Aono was probably just lying. And if that's the case, he'd like to know if she knew anything about those social media posts claiming that Aono had physically harmed her. And as she averted her gaze by looking down, she began lying like it was her job, since Kondo was more than likely really worried about her. So when he mentioned it to someone else, the information probably got leaked as he's not the type of person to spread rumors for fun, before confirming that it was true, that Aono did cause those bruises on her body. But of course, it came as no surprise to him that she had given a fabricated answer. And if that's the case, then he had one final question he wanted to ask her. If it were really true that Aono used violence, then the school would have no other choice but to punish him. So he asked one last time whether it was true Aono had harmed her. And as she began to stutter, Takayanagi reminded her that this was something very important, leaving her to answer that she simply doesn't know, as she was emotionally overwhelmed. And with that said, Takayanagi-sensei decided to stop here for the day, urging her that if she had anything else she wanted to say, then of course now would be the time. But she simply replied that she didn't.
See
And
how
if
she
that
said
was
she
the
was
case, then she
telling
was
you
more
the
than
same
welcome to return to
And then really
class.
she doesn't want to.
As
You know,
she walked
confirm
away,
it. Yeah.
Takayanagi recalls documenting Aono's messages to Miyuki, and if he were to use this as evidence along with his trump card, then there's no way that she'll be able to escape. Though, if he's being honest, he lacks the decisive proof needed to corner the real culprit. So for now, he'll let her remain free for a little longer. And if she had only told him everything he needed to hear, perhaps there could have been a way to save her. But unfortunately, it only goes downhill from here for Amada Miyuki.
Yeah, that's
Yup, it's your boy Noodles, and if you hate Miyuki as much as I do,
Oh man. Yeah. Let me still hold on. Yeah, that was a good video. I promise to drop the link for the actual manga. 'Cause I know what it is. I'll probably drop the link in the channel so you can read the rest, and especially they did do well. I swear there's another video where they wrapped that series up. I promise to find it. I just don't remember what it was. I promise to find it, but yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. See you.